All right. Looks like I have one person on here already, and I already have a thumbs up. So either my mom's watching or my wife is on her, way from work, coming home, watching me live, which is hilarious. But what's going on, everybody? It's Sasha, your licensed real estate market expert here in Charlotte, and we're here for the live Q&A. As you can tell, it is a leap year, February 29th. And when I looked at my calendar earlier this week and this past weekend, it didn't even cross my mind. I figured, hey, perfect. The first Thursday of the month is going to be March 1st. But I just assumed it. I didn't look at my calendar. And sure enough, yesterday, double checked. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do the live now because I like to have it that first week of March out there. And then the second week, we're going to be doing the market report, which is going to be coming out next. So I'm excited. But we have a couple people on here, guys. So you guys are rocking and rolling with the likes. I appreciate it. Leave me any comments, anything you have. Happy to answer it for you while we're on here. I'm all set up here on my end. And other than that, I'm just going to hop into a couple questions that I've gotten on some other videos and things like that I thought were pretty interesting. This was a comment on my last market report that I just did. Elizabeth, my house has tripled in value since 2005. That seems fake. I don't trust it. We're always starting off these lives with something about the real estate market and the prices. And I agree. It's a little crazy, for houses to triple in value since 2005, and especially yours. And it's interesting. There's a lot of areas, not just in Charlotte, but all over the country that tend to almost double in value every 10 years. So it's not very uncommon, but obviously Charlotte in the last 4 or 5 years has absolutely exploded as far as the market, as far as the prices goes. And one of the biggest reasons for that was we were underpriced for such a long time. I don't recommend it because you might give yourself a headache or a heart attack. But if you go back and look at the prices that we had in Charlotte in 2018 and 2019, in some of these very high demand areas that people love, that are still getting multiple offers today, you'll see that the prices they were amazingly reasonable. But unfortunately, hindsight is always 2020. Nobody has a crystal ball, so we didn't know what, the implications and things like that, what would happen. And sure enough, now we're up there. You know what I mean? Housing hasn't really kind of skipped a beat. We're seeing a little dips here and there. And what I'm noticing most is you just have to be very vigilant. If you're in the market, if you keep your eye on the market, if you keep your eye on a certain neighborhood, something will come up. There is opportunities out there. The market, again, it's relatively flat, ups and downs. One house gets listed, multiple offers, another house gets listed, it's sitting for a couple of weeks or a couple months. So it'll vary. But I remember when I moved here from Ohio, my family it was a 3-bedroom house in Ohio, and they sold it for $110,000, I believe. And we came to Charlotte. I was exploring Charlotte, and I was in Plaza Midwood, which is easily one of my favorite areas. And I remember seeing a condo right there on Central Avenue in Plaza Midwood. And I just looked it up randomly, and it was on the market. I want to say it was like $105,000. I just kept my eye on it. I was 21 years old, so I kept my eye on it. And it ended up selling, I think, for $95,000. It was a 1-bedroom. It might have even been a studio. And I was like, oh my God, I would never in my life spend $100,000 on a 1-bedroom or a studio condo when my parents had a 3-bedroom single family home in Ohio for 110. But obviously, at the time, 21 years old, no idea about real estate, no idea about nothing. And you kind of realize how real estate is in so many areas. I moved here from Ohio, and it's a lot more expensive in Charlotte than it is living in Cleveland, Ohio. There's no doubt about it. So it's a little bit of a culture shock for me. And then you have the opposite of a culture shock for a lot of the other people that are moving here from these more expensive states. So it's definitely all relative. It's just kind of, you kind of have to live through that perspective. You kind of have to go through that to figure out where you're at. I, at the time, had no idea about anything about real estate or anything of the sort. And if I could go back in time, I'd buy 10 of them, if I had that opportunity. 95, John said 95,000 today is barely a cardboard box. Man, you're 100% right. And I love seeing the memes on social media, where it'll be like a toy house or something like that. It'll be like toy house just listed on the market, selling for 500,000, and then there's 100 offers on it or whatever the case is. But yeah, I mean, man, I wish I was psychic in a past life or something like that. That way I could have, cashed in on a couple things. Nicholas Massey, how do they determine property taxes to charge you for a rental property? Is it based on the initial type of loan you get, or is it based on your tax return when you file? So as far as your property taxes, no, it's not based off the type of loan you have, and it's not based on your property taxes or anything like that. It's based off of the assessed value that the county gives it, that the city gives it. So normally what they'll end up doing is, obviously they've done this twice now in the last like 3 years, I believe, because of the real estate prices have been going up. They essentially just get an evaluation for a specific neighborhood, and if they see these price jumps, they'll assess the value based off those price jumps. So it was very interesting when the last tax assessment went out and everybody's property taxes went up. I actually talked to a couple sellers that had houses that weren't anywhere near what the tax assessment was. Reason being, these sellers had a house that was built in the 70s or 80s, and they were in an area like Cotswold, and you have these multi-million-dollar homes, and you have these houses that are, built in the 70s, 80s, fully renovated, selling for $800,000, $900,000 to $1 million. And these people, they haven't renovated their house in 20, 30 years. So the county and the city was assessing their tax value based off those higher houses. So what a lot of people had to do was they needed to come up with a comp report. They needed to get an appraisal. I actually did this for about 2 people during that time. They were a little bit older, so they're not computer savvy or anything like that. And I said, hey, I don't mind. I'll run a couple comps for you. I'll send it to you, and you can, mail it off or email it or fax it, whatever you want to do to the city. So you can tell them, hey, that's great. There's these houses for 800,000 plus in my neighborhood, but my house isn't up to par with those houses. My house isn't updated. My house isn't worth that much. So why are you charging me for that? So that's what people had to do when they reassessed those tax values. But to answer your question, no, I mean, as soon as the city starts seeing real estate prices in certain neighborhoods and certain areas go up, obviously they want our money, they want those tax dollars. So they'll reassess an entire zip code, they'll reassess an entire neighborhood or a side of town. And then based off of those values within your neighborhood, they essentially assume that your house is valued the same. So it very much depends, obviously. If you get a good tax assessment, if your house is super done up and worth over $1 million and they assessed you at $700,000-$800,000, obviously I wouldn't recommend saying anything so you can keep your tax low. But no, that's essentially what it's based off of. They just do reassessments. And I know from people I've worked with, especially from New Jersey, people from New Jersey that I've worked with, they tell me that their houses were getting reassessed for taxes every single year. They were like, Sasha, I'm terrified to even have nice landscaping in front of my house. I'm terrified to put an addition. I don't want to put new windows. I don't want to make my house look nice because I don't want them to up the taxes on me like they do almost every year, which is kind of crazy. So by law, they have to do it every 8 years. They have to do it every 8 years, but they're allowed to do it every year. Luckily for us here in Charlotte, they don't do it that frequently. But like I said, I believe they've done 2 assessments in the last 3 years. So just keep an eye out for that. Any questions, leave them down there in the comments. Happy to answer them. And as always, call, text, or email me if you need me. If there's anything I can ever do for you, if you have a more personal question, maybe that you don't want to go over on this platform, I completely understand. Hey, Sasha, the house you showed on your last market report, what did it end up selling for? Oh, you're talking about the house in Ballantyne where I put that little snippet. I assume, I don't think I showed any other houses. It's still under contract. So that house came on the market on February 2nd. So it's probably going to close next week. It's probably going to close this upcoming week. So if I do, when I do another live, I'll try to remember and see. I'm curious what it's going to sell for. I think I said it's probably going to sell for like 50K or more above, because it wouldn't surprise me. Based off the condition, based off the updates, it's a really good looking home. And it's one of those houses that when you look at it online, it's the same house that you're going to see in person. More often than not, when you see pictures, they got the beautiful wide angle lens. You know, sometimes they'll put on a fake fireplace, fake furniture. They love to edit out the power lines and stuff like that. So you end up going to the house not knowing there's a 50-yard tall power line in front of your house. But this house actually looked like the picture, so I wouldn't be surprised. But I might bring this up on the market report when it comes out next week. Do you recommend getting a home inspection for new construction? Yeah. So the way I look at it, you're buying a house. You're buying a house. You're putting down a 3%, a 5% plus down payment. You buy a house. Typically, people move every 7 to 8 years. Some people say it's 5 to 7. I like to think 7 to 8 based off the data and stats. It's not something you do often. You're already spending 3% on a down payment. You're already paying closing costs. You're already doing a bunch of stuff. You're buying refrigerators, washer, dryers. You're buying furniture. There's no better return on investment, sort of say, than getting a home inspection, even though it's new construction. The builders do a great job, but you got to think they're building so many other houses. These construction crews, these communities are not just, hey, we're focusing just on this one house and we're going to make it absolutely perfect. No, they work on the house a little bit here, then they got to jump to the next house, whatever project, then they got to keep jumping all over the place. So it's relatively easy for somebody to miss something, for somebody to make a mistake. Even though they do a lot of like quality control inspections themselves, the county comes to look at it, they go through multiple things, but like I said, you're already spending the money. Pay $500, pay $750, pay that money and get a home inspection. You never know what you're going to be able to find. And as I said, it's a return on investment, even with new construction, because most often than not, the builder is going to take care of it, unless it's something that the builder does for a specific reason. Home inspectors are amazing, but if it's not 100% correct, it is going to go on the home inspection. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean that, something is wrong. So just keep that in mind. But like I said, you're buying a house, you should get that home inspection no matter what. It's a little bit of a drop in the bucket, and 100% get a home inspection on new construction. Don't even let me get started on a resale home. 1,000,000%, get that home inspection done. 3 Monkey, going to renew our lease for another year. These prices will not continue. It sucks to keep renting, but doesn't suck as much as spending too much and regretting it. Yeah, it's man, I'm so torn, because I'm telling you, for the past couple of years, guys, I've thought we'd have more relief than we currently do have in the market, and it just has not come. It really just has not come. It's been pretty interesting with the rates lately. They've started to creep up. Talked to one of my lenders. They said, hey, they think they're going to start to creep down again. But it's so interesting. And me being on YouTube, it's kind of funny. I really don't like it, but every now and then, a video will pop up and saying, hey, this is what's going to happen with the market. The market's going to crash 40%. The market's going to crash 50%, or whatever the case is. And if you had taken certain advice from some of these people that have been, saying these kind of certain things, you might have missed out, like I did, potentially in a ton of opportunities. There's been people saying that the market's going to crash for 4 years now, even 5 years. In 2018, 2019, when I was working with people, there was people telling me, hey, Sasha, I think the prices are too high. and prices since then, if not doubled, in some areas, maybe even more. There's people that bought houses 4 or 5 years ago, and did absolutely nothing to them, just paid the mortgage, and they listed their house, and, they could potentially net two, three, 400+ thousand dollars. Like we talked about on the last live, Christian McCaffrey bought his house 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I can't remember, for 7.5 million. It's on the market in Lake Norman for 12.5 million. Did absolutely nothing because I took a look at it when it was sold and what it looks like now. Little touch ups and things like that here and there, but nothing worth $5 million extra for. I don't see it, but that's what the market did. So at the end of the day, do what's right for you. You know your affordability, you know what your comfort level is, you know your timeline, you know your future plans. Looking at everything long term, I've said this a bunch, real estate prices really don't impact me. They don't impact any decision I make because whatever I buy, I plan on keeping for the rest of my life. So I'm not worried about today's prices versus 10 years versus 20 versus 30, especially here in Charlotte because our growth, you guys see it, our growth hasn't slowed down. It might have slowed down a tiny little bit, but I'm just saying that just to say it. I really don't think it has, based off my personal experience and what I'm seeing. But even if it did, like I said, I'm not seeing it. Does everyone have $700,000 and up for homes? Middle class is moving on up. It can feel that way sometimes. In all honesty, I get phone calls from people relocating, people wanting to pay cash for houses that are $500,000 plus. And trust me, when the market was booming, it still relatively is, but when we were going through the major boom, when like every single house was selling for $30,000-$50,000 plus, I was just thinking in my head, like, oh, wow, like all these people come out of the woodwork and it's just like all this money is flowing in. You're buying a house, you're bidding $50,000 up, you're signing an addendum to the contract saying, hey, if the house doesn't appraise for the price that I offered, I'll make up the difference and just pay the difference. So if you listed your house for 500,000, I offered you 550, and the bank came back and said, hey, house isn't worth 550. I'm only going to give you a loan for 500. These people were just coming out of pocket. Here's 50,000 on top of whatever other down payment they were doing and things like that. So I know it seems like that, but at the end of the day, we all know that's not true. Not everybody has $700,000 to spend on a home, and I would arguably say the majority don't versus do. Obviously, certain things, social media, certain things that you see a lot of it could be potentially smoke and mirrors, but trust me, I know it can feel like that sometimes. It can feel like, man, how are these people doing this and all this stuff? But don't get discouraged. Jerome Powell said, what the millennials need or what young people need or something like that is a slight correction in the housing market. When it will happen, nobody's going to know. If it's going to happen, nobody's going to know. They printed literally almost a third of the money that's in circulation here, and one of the biggest assets to have to fight inflation is real estate. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know if you guys have been keeping up with some of the news or things like that, but we are starting to see a lot of job layoffs. A lot of these tech companies and things like that are starting to lay people off. A lot of the banks, and mind you, we're in Charlotte. We're number 2 in banking behind New York City. So we're potentially seeing some layoffs and things like that. I'm wondering if it'll play into the mix. I had a deal last year in Providence Plantation, and the guy that was selling the house was in the banking industry, and he actually lost his job last year. He had bought the house, it was like 2 or 3 years prior, and they listed it. I honestly can't remember the exact price. I want to say it was like 800,000 or 805,000 or something like that. That same weekend, it was listed on a Thursday or Friday. We got the house under contract that Saturday or Sunday at $20,000 under the listed price. And after we got the inspection, we found a bunch of stuff that was going on, and I negotiated as much as I possibly could, and they literally covered almost every single thing on the inspection, minus like a couple little dumb things that just naturally happen with any home. And I couldn't believe it. So, if something like that happens, could we see a little bit more come to the market? Could we see some people that potentially, overstretched their budget and potentially lost their job? We could, but obviously we don't want to wish that on anybody or anything like that. But we'll see what happens. It's been interesting. We've seen a lot of the layoffs and stuff like that happening. Um, Especially in the tech industry. And like I said, Charlotte's number 2 in banking, and we've seen some of the banks start laying people off. Meanwhile, here, Wells Fargo is trying to put this ginormous Wells Fargo sign in the center of Uptown Charlotte on the Wells Fargo building or the Duke Energy building, and it's like, well, I'm getting mixed signals. We're thinking people are going to get laid off, and they're putting this giant Wells Fargo sign in the middle of Uptown Charlotte. Trev Mortgage looks like a loan officer. Are you still seeing clients able to negotiate price below list and/or seller concessions for closing? Yes. I hate, because I repeat this all the time. Every situation is different, so it all varies. It all varies. You don't know the motivation behind a certain seller, and things like that. So you just got to kind of test the waters. Your offer terms matter. The seller situation matters. The area matters. Is the price, priced correctly? But for the most part, yeah, it's very neutral. It's very neutral. The house that, I think it was on the last live, but the house that I was super excited to go see, that I had everything prepared. We had the pre-approval, obviously ready to go. I figured, hey, this might be a multiple offer situation because I love this neighborhood. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go, this certain amount over, and I feel comfortable with going this much over. And sure enough, we ended up going to see. I couldn't even get a showing. That's how busy it was. So ended up going to see it during the open house, and it just didn't hit the boxes for me. I was so excited when I saw the pictures, but going there, it just felt a little bit off. The floor plan wasn't what I thought it was going to be based off of some other similar homes in the neighborhood. And I was like, you know what? It's a multiple offer situation. If I'm having to go, I was going to offer $35,000 above list price, just to let you know. But so if I have to be in a multiple offer situation, offer $35K above list price, and then I have to knock down walls and do a bunch of structural stuff and update the kitchen, bathrooms, flooring, paint, all that stuff, I was like, I don't want to do it. It's really important, unless you know what you're getting into, buying a house with a good floor plan. Buying a house with a good floor plan is one of the best things you can do, because it's not minimal work required, but it's a lot less than having to move walls, do structural changes, especially with contractors having to pull permits. They're gonna have to charge you more, all this stuff. So, if you have a good floor plan, make it work. If you only have to maybe knock down one wall and put up a beam, that's not so bad. But this house in question, it was one of those houses. It had like 2 little living room areas. It had like a little reading weird area next to the dining room. And I was like, I don't know how I'm gonna make this work. It just doesn't make any sense for me. Okay, this was a good question. What amount is expected for due diligence? And I hate to give you the attorney answer, but it varies, right? Typically, on average, you'll see anywhere from 1 to 3% of the listed price and/or of the purchase price. But like I said, it could be way higher than that if the house just hit the market and you have multiple offers, and it could be way lower than that if the house has been sitting on the market for a couple months. The lowest due diligence I think I've ever been able to is $500, and that's non-refundable if you decide to back out of the purchase of the home. So it's going to vary, but I've been telling my buyers recently, the last year and a half or so, it's night and day. It's night and day. When the market was super hot, people were doing 20, 30 plus $1,000 in non-refundable due diligence money. Granted, as long as you buy the home, that due diligence money goes towards your down payment, it goes towards your closing costs. However, it's still a risk, especially for a home, that might be a little bit older and things like that. So due diligence is something you need to take into consideration and should be based off of the home itself. Why would you offer $20,000 in due diligence, $20,000 of non-refundable money if you go see the home? You know the HVAC is old. You know by looking at the roof has all these little dark spots. The roof is covered with leaves. There's certain things that you can tell. When I'm walking through a house with my buyers, I let my buyers look at the house and they look at the kitchen, look at the bathrooms, look at the floor plan. I, on the other hand, while they're doing that, I'm looking at the windows, I'm looking at the HVAC, I'm looking at the plumbing. What type of plumbing is it? Is it polybutylene? Because that could be a potential big issue during inspection. I look at the roof, I look at the gutters, I look at, the ceiling corners, I look at where moisture tends to build up in bathrooms because that's normal. But I take a look at all these different things because I know if they're interested in that house, our offer, our due diligence, every single thing with the offer is going to be related to what we see in the house. You don't want to put yourself in a bad situation, and actually looking at the home is what's going to put you in a good situation as far as what I should offer for due diligence. More often than not, if it's a newer home, if the house is 5, 10 years old or whatever the case is, you could be fairly confident that things are still good. But again, you never know who the owner was. You never know what the maintenance schedule was. You don't know any of that stuff. So typically on average, you can say 1 to 3% of the purchase price that you're looking to offer. It could be way lower and it could also be way higher if you're in a competitive situation. Sellers care about the due diligence because they're saying, hey, this guy is a very serious buyer. He knows this money is non-refundable if he backs out, so I feel a lot more comfortable accepting this offer based off of his due diligence because I know it's going to be hard to walk away from $10, $15, $20,000. And I keep using these high examples. Don't let that fool you. I got a house under contract right now for $950,000. Our due diligence was under 10. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to give you a little bit more extreme examples. Daniel P, not a question, but a statement. I totally love Indian land. I'm glad you do, man. Indian land's a cool area, and no signs of slowing down. I think it's going to continue to boom. A lot of people are starting to consider South Carolina and things like that, and people love the new construction that's up there. They got some pretty cool neighborhoods, but I don't know too much about it, but I guess they're opening up a Costco, so home value's going up. Somebody said hold till 2025. Yeah, man, I guess, yeah. We'll see what happens. It's so weird. Every single year is like, wait till next year, wait till next year, wait till next year. And if I would have bought a house every single year for the last 5 years, I think I'd be doing, very, very, very okay for myself, which is a great strategy if you're looking to accumulate stuff. All right, here we go. We got something. Pujit, thoughts on Charlotte's CAT system? See improvements coming to route frequency. As far as the CAT system goes, to be honest, I'm not 100% sure. I just read, let me see. There was something that came up in regards to the light rail extension, and I don't know if they pulled back on the project or it's going through some phases right now. But to be honest with you, as far as improvements coming to route frequency, I honestly have no idea. I haven't read anything about the CAT system, which is the bus system, not the light rail system. But I haven't read anything as far as improvements goes. I know like the plans and Charlotte plans for like 2040, obviously a lot of it is revolved around improving traffic and improving transit. So I would assume it's kind of on pace, but to be honest, it's not something that I've researched lately. The last time I read about like the light rail system and all that stuff was a couple months ago. Just got back from a week in Charlotte, astounded by all the construction going in and around Weddington, but saddened at the same time. All the beautiful forest will be gone quickly. Yes, yes. The demand is driving there, especially, Weddington, Wesley Chapel, Marvin, Waxhaw, super popular areas. People love the schools over there. That area that's going to continue to grow. Unfortunately and fortunately, they're going to continue to keep building over there. So yeah, I mean, yeah, they're knocking down these trees and building all these big communities and things like that. But funny enough, when you're flying into Charlotte, it's still relatively hard to see some houses because we have so many trees. But it's just natural, I think it's going to continue to happen. I don't see us slowing down anytime soon. All right, guys. To be honest with you, I'm not getting as many questions as I was hoping for, but I hope you enjoyed the live. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and I will catch you next week for the market report, which I'm very excited about. So stay tuned. Call, text, or email me anytime. I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Bye.